What if your best employees have already mentally quit and they haven't told you yet? I don't think this is a very unfamiliar statement. We probably have evidenced this personally and firsthand, or probably we have been in this situation ourselves, right? So you don't wake up one morning and feel disengaged and decide to resign, or you don't resign and then become disengaged. The disengagement starts long before you decide to resign. And probably resignation is the last resort or the last step in this entire process, right? But what are we doing about it? Are we really, looking at those disengagement signs and doing something about it? Or are we overlooking and not really addressing when it is required? And before we get started with the session, it is very important for us to understand why is it so critical. So let's take UAE alone. The attrition rate in the UAE is 20 to 25%. And the businesses spend about $2.7 million annually for replacement. And when I'm talking about replacement, I'm not talking just about your recruitment cost. When an employee resigns, especially if they are your top performing or best employees, there is a huge impact, loss of productivity, the morale of the team dips. And if this is your best employee, your confidence of your client in you probably would get impacted. There could be loss of IP. There are so many effects of a resignation which we tend to ignore and not really understand the huge impact. And even if I have to talk from a position perspective, replacing a skilled employee, again, I'm not talking about an exec. I'm not talking about someone who works in niche technology. I'm just talking about a skilled employee is 3 to 5 times the annual salary. So that's the kind of gravity, with not having the right retention strategies within the organization. And before we even dive into, the disengagement factors, some of us must already be thinking we already are doing a lot of things, but still, the engagement program is not working for us. So what we're going to be doing today is just talk about some of the key disengagement factors and talk about some of the retention strategies that are practical and can be implemented. So I call this hidden, disengagement factors because they are not out loud there, but unfortunately we tend to, overlook them or not recognize them and wait for the last minute for us to, have this conversation with the employee after he or she has resigned to reverse that resignation. And one of the important elements is most employees leave the organization and they do not state the actual reason for resignation. So you would probably see this, or you would have witnessed this, where as soon as you complete your annual review process, your bonuses are out, your promotion list is out, suddenly there is a surge of resignation, right? And you know why the employees are resigning. Either they're not happy with the rating, they are not happy that they've not been promoted, or they were expecting a certain increase, percentage of increase, and that's not what they got, or someone that has been just waiting for the bonus to be paid out and they've already decided they would resign. But when it comes to exit interview, what are the common exit interview reasons that you would find? Oh, I have a personal reason, or for growth, but better opportunity. That's all that is quoted, right? So, but there's more beyond that. And the first one is micro disengagement. The silent signs that we often overlook. So let's take an example of, and we all would have this one particular individual in the team who is very energetic, highly enthusiastic, and in any team meeting raises their hand, wants to participate. Suddenly you see withdrawal symptoms. And this is not very loud. You tend to hear that, oh, today I'm late for whatever reason, or I can't participate in this because I'm overworked. There are a lot of very minor excuses that the employee would quote, and the disengagement starts much before they, mentally decide to resign. And unfortunately, we ignore these because these are very, very small and minor signs, right? And we tend to not pay enough attention to these signs. And there was a recent survey done by Gallup, which says that 42% of turnover is preventable. But unfortunately, these are ignored, right? So how can we spot? How can we spot these disengagements and address them, which is very, very critical? The next one is purpose decay. If you look at the previous generation, they really wanted to be, in the workforce for stability, and wanting to meet their basic needs. But if you look at the newer generation, they are looking for meaningful work, purpose driven. They want to join the organization because they believe in the value of the organization or believe in the value of the leader of the organization. But when they join the organization, there is misalignment, or they don't find meaning, or there is loss of meaning in the work that they are doing, and that doesn't keep them motivated. So sometimes, when you, especially the recruiters, you would have candidates talking to you, "Oh, this is my dream company and I want to join this because of the value statement of the organization," or "I believe in your CEO and that's why I want to join this organization." But does that mission statement translate into your day-to-day operation, or is it just on the wall? Or is your leader that inspires externally is also influencing internally? Sometimes there is a disconnect, right? You join an organization with a certain expectation, or you join an organization and over time, the organization kind of gets deviated from the primary vision, and there is, lack or misalignment of a value system. And that's what happens in the purpose decay. So when you lose meaning of work. The third factor is career stagnation syndrome. And I think most of us have gone through this, right? So everyone, especially in your professional life, what do you want to do? You want to grow. You want to see a promotion in terms of, or growth in terms of monetary, increase in financial growth. You want to see, you want to learn, and you want to have newer titles. There are various aspirations. And here, when I say career stagnation, I'm just not talking about monetary, from a monetary perspective. There are certain individuals where the role actually motivates them than the financial factors. So, and this is very important when individuals don't feel that they're growing and they have the fear of being stuck in that role. That also leads to disengagement. And how do we, address this? And most often, there is a 2-year disengagement rule. And every individual in their career, even if they're in the same organization, they go through that journey of ups and downs, right? So when you join an organization, in the first 6 months, you're trying to learn the organization, you're trying to settle in the next 6 months, you're performing, it's a new environment, you have the autonomy to do different things. And in the second year, automatically, it's human psychology, right? That you expect there is growth. You see, a bonus, you see increase in terms of your salary, or there is a promotion, or you're able to work on newer projects and increase your knowledge. When these things don't happen, that leads to disengagement. And the last factor, which is very, I find this very, very interesting. I mean, most often employee engagement has the, biggest weightage on the HR KPI, right? But where does the employee engagement actually happen? It's the manager. So when there is a manager mismatch, this is your biggest retention risk. So managers are the individuals who basically have the biggest impact on the daily experience in an employee's career or life. So it's not the leader, it's not the brand or the HR that has the impact as much as the manager. And sometimes the organization does not enable the managers enough, or do not give them enough coaching and guidance to become that good people manager so that they can keep their employees engaged. And I've had this argument many times with my leaders where I would say increase the weightage on employee engagement for your managers. The attrition KPI should also be in your manager's KPI. It's not just sitting with HR, because we are the enablers. We create employee engagement programs so that the managers and the leaders within the organization can take them and implement and execute them. We cannot be the one who are responsible for driving engagement. We are only the enablers. And this is something that is missed often, and HR are held responsible for driving engagement, but unfortunately, it doesn't just sit with HR. So these, we could talk about various factors, but I kind of wanted to sum it up. And I think these four factors kind of sum up what are some of the hidden disengagement that lead to a resignation or attrition in an organization. So now that we've spoken about the disengagement factors, I want to spend the next few minutes talking about some of the strategies that you can use within your organization to mitigate the attrition in the organization. So the retention strategies that actually work. And as I mentioned, most often we would be thinking we already have an employee engagement program in the organization, but unfortunately it's not it's not working because the traditional employee engagement models will not work in this era because they were designed for workplaces that no longer exist. So what is employee engagement program? Most often we would say, oh, we have a foosball table in our office and we have 10 different coffee flavors, and that's what brings employees to the office. But does that really engage and motivate your employees? I mean, if I'm talking about myself, when I started my career, my coffee machine or the vending machine had hot chocolate, and that excited me back then because we are young and we hot chocolate in the office kind of was exciting. But right now it's a very different workplace, especially after COVID. A lot of organizations are working remotely, so whether you have a foosball table, a tt table, or different flavors of coffees in the office will not drive employees to come to work, right? So we need to think differently. We need to, and also when you look at the current generation or workforce, you have the Gen Zs, you have the Gen X, some of the baby boomers still in the workforce. So you can't have a cookie cutter approach where you design an engagement program that will work for everyone. Your Gen Zs were highly motivated and wanted stability. But if you look at the millennials, they are very passionate of or want to find purpose in work. So it's very, very different generation. So you have to have different approaches in terms of how you want to create your employee engagement programs. So with that, I want to talk about some of the strategies that could be implemented, and it's very easy to implement. So what happens in exit interview? The employee has already resigned, and then you're trying to retain him or reverse the resignation, but the damage is already done, right? There's not much you can do. Yes, you can pull out some analytics based on what are the reasons, the top reasons the employees are leaving, and create an action plan. But the damage is already done. We haven't been proactive. We are being very reactive. Or there are organizations who would say we have annual surveys and we run these surveys every year, but are they really effective? Because annual surveys, in my opinion, are too long. Like you're talking to your employee once a year. And if you look at your annual surveys, you conduct your annual survey, you do the analysis, and then you create an action plan that is implemented. This takes about good 4 to 5 months from the time you run the survey till you implement the action plan. By then, the issues that were highlighted in your annual survey probably are no longer issues. So you are trying to address or you're trying to mitigate something with the problem that does not exist anymore. So instead, do stay interviews. And what does stay, you need to do this periodically. So once a quarter, conduct stay interviews or pulse surveys, as we call, and just ask the 5 stay question. What motivates you to come to work every day? What is the one factor that is really frustrating in your job? Ask, do you feel seen or appreciated in the organization? What is that one skill that you want to develop or learn here? And ask the tough question, are you planning to leave? There could be employees who are just waiting for you to ask that question. No one's going to come and tell you. Yes, there are certain people who would say, I want to quit, I want to quit. But the intent could not be that, but they would be silent quitting, right? You've heard this term. So ask these questions and do it in a very short period so that you understand what's the pulse on the floor and you can immediately create an action plan to address those issues rather than waiting till someone resigns or for an annual survey. Micro promotions. Now, we've spoken about career stagnation in the disengagement factor, right? What are micro promotions? So everyone likes to be appreciated. Everyone likes to see that little bit of growth. So, instead of, and especially in the current scenario, in the current age, a lot of organization are flat organization. They don't really have, hierarchies. You would probably have the CEO, director, and everyone else kind of reports into the director. So giving those promotions or title changes becomes very difficult. So instead, try and give them smaller, recognitions and make those, micro promotions. So increase the responsibility of the individuals that kind of motivates them to do more. So look at those aspects and also celebrate wins. Create recognition programs that really speak to the employees. So those are some small wins that would have huge impact in from a retention perspective. The next one, which is probably my favorite, which is internal gig economy. You know, you so right now everyone is talking about AI. How do we, kind of integrate into workforce, right? So you need to have exposure for your employees across all your departments. So try and put them into projects where AI is being used. You look at internal mobility. And that there are organizations that do this very thoroughly. My first organization, Accenture, was huge on internal mobility. So you would have an internal job board and people could apply to these roles. And in fact, in one of my last organization, the biggest and the best ideas for products came from the finance team. So, consider this. They could be smaller cross-functional projects and short-term projects where you could have, say, a finance person working in commercial department. That way, you are one, creating a lot of collaboration and also, killing the silos. Silos are something that are not good for organization. And most often, I think even we have done it. We tend to finger point at the other department. Oh, this did not happen because HR did not move fast or procurement did not move fast. Oh, the finance is not processing the invoice and which is affecting the vendors and the vendors are not delivering. So why not, have this internal mobility where your finance people sit in HR people sit in finance or commercial team for a very short project. And that way they understand some of the pain points and also bring in, newer perspective and diversity from a thought perspective. Sometimes you have people sitting in different departments and saying, HR should have done this or finance should have done this. So you are looking at problems from a different perspective, right? So that brings in a lot of collaboration. It breaks the silos and also brings in diversity to the problem, or rather to the solution. So let's look at internal gig economy. And lastly, obviously, we've spoken about manager mismatch in the disengagement factor. So we have to definitely speak about manager feedback or how do we address or how do we have a strategy that addresses the manager mismatch, manager reverse feedback. So this is very bold, but highly impactful. So now you have managers. Sometimes managers are not ready to be managers. So have you given them the coaching, mentoring, and guidance to become that best people manager? And you expect a people manager to, supervise a team of, say, 10 to 15 people. That's a large span. And you expect the manager to sit and have one-on-ones with them and give regular feedback, constructive feedback while they're running their, daily operations. So if you look at the managers, I think 70% of their job is to manage the team and run their operations, whereas the other 30% is upward management, looking into the strategy and everything else. So how will, if I'm the manager, responsible for 15 people, and if I'm not getting the feedback from the people that I'm managing, and I could be doing something really great and I don't know that I'm doing something great and I need to continue doing it, or I could be doing something terribly wrong and I'm not even aware of that, right? So how do we build that communication channel? While my manager might give me feedback, but my manager is not the one who is working with me on a day-to-day basis, right? Or he or she would only see the issues and the outcomes that I am highlighting. But the team on the ground would have their own challenges. So, how do we bridge that gap? There has to be a feedback loop, and it's very essential how we enable the managers through this reverse feedback. And this builds accountability amongst the team members. So, if I get feedback from my team, I'm aware, and that makes me accountable for my delivery, and that also makes me responsible for my team, and vice versa. When my team is asked to give feedback to me, my team becomes equally accountable to give me the right feedback so that I can guide them and mentor them. So it works in both ways, and I would highly recommend that, whether you are in HR, whether you are a business leader or manager, that you go seek for that feedback or make this feedback as a culture within the organization. I want to really quote Simon Sinek here, where he mentioned, when you are financially invested, you expect return, but when you're emotionally invested, you contribute. I think that kind of sums up today's topic of retention.